My son-in-law took the plate out of my hands in front of 16 people, set it beside the catered salmon, and said, so softly nobody at the table had to hear him unless they wanted to, "Staff eats after the guests, Walter, and you're not family anymore." My fingers locked so hard around the napkin that my knuckles popped. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. Claire stared at the white tablecloth like there was something written on it she needed to memorize. My grandson Ben stood halfway down the staircase in his little navy blazer, watching me with that stunned, open face children get when they realize grown-ups have just broken a rule no one said out loud. And I said 6 words that changed his whole month. "Then take my name off everything." Nathan smiled when I said it. An hour later, his secretary called my phone by mistake, and I found out dinner had only been the first cut. If you've ever been smiled at while somebody tried to erase you, stay with me and subscribe, because this one didn't end the way Nathan thought it would. The part he didn't know was that I had already noticed 3 things in that house that did not make sense, and once I put them together, I understood I had never been invited there to belong. I had been invited there to be useful. The first thing was the lock. I had a brass key on Maggie's old ring, heavy and warm from years in my pocket. I'd used that key on the side door of the main house for almost 6 years. Through birthdays, flu seasons, Christmas mornings, school pickups, and the long gray winter after my wife died, that key had always turned with a little stiff click halfway in. I knew the exact pressure it needed. Then one Tuesday in early March, I came back from picking up cough medicine for Ben, slid the key in, and it stopped dead after half an inch. I stood there on the slate step with the pharmacy bag in my hand, staring at the keyhole like it had insulted me. Nathan opened the door a second later. "Oh," he said, all pleasant surprise. "We upgraded the security system. Didn't Claire tell you?" He said security system the way people say curation now, like every ordinary thing had to sound expensive. Claire came down the hall drying her hands. "I thought I did," she said too quickly. "You know, after those package thefts. There had been one missing box. Garden gloves. Mine, actually." Nathan took the bag from my hand without asking and added, "Just text before you come into the main house, Walter. Cleaner that way. Cleaner." He meant controlled. I remember standing in the doorway smelling roasted garlic and floor polish, and the sweet plastic scent of the balloons Ben had begged for that weekend, and something in me tightened. Not anger, not yet. More like the feeling you get when a floorboard shifts under your weight, and you realize rot has been spreading where no one could see it. I should tell you what that house was before I tell you what Nathan turned it into. It was a tired old colonial on Hawthorne Lane with peeling cream paint, a sagging porch rail, and a detached carriage house leaning 2 degrees to the left, like it had given up arguing with weather. Most people saw a money pit. Maggie saw a home. She used to stand on the cracked back patio with coffee in one hand and say, "One day there'll be grandchildren chasing each other between these hydrangeas, and nobody will feel like a guest." Maggie died before we ever bought it. Pancreatic cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. Fast enough to make every promise in the room feel unfinished. After she was gone, Claire called me more than once a day for a while. She was 34 then, exhausted, new baby on her hip, married to a man who already knew how to look sympathetic without actually helping. Nathan worked in land use law for a boutique firm downtown. He wore tailored suits, spoke in measured tones, and treated every conversation like he was positioning exhibits for a jury. He also had terrible timing with money. 2 years after Ben was born, Nathan got himself tangled in a commercial investment that went bad. Nothing criminal then, just vanity and leverage. He and Claire were upside down on their condo, and the old colonial on Hawthorne Lane came up at a tax sale because the estate that owned it had fallen apart in probate. Claire called me crying. She wanted a yard for Ben. She wanted a place where holidays could happen again. She wanted, though she didn't say it directly, something solid after her mother was gone. So I did what fathers do when love makes them stupid in very ordinary ways. I sold my shop. Not all at once. I had spent 37 years building custom cabinets and staircases, and repairing old homes people with real money wanted to feel noble about preserving. My hands had permanent white scars near the thumbs from routers and chisels. I sold the industrial planer, then the spray booth, then the old Ford van with the ladder rack. I cashed out enough of my retirement to help buy the house, and when the papers were drawn up, my share went on title because more than a third of the money was mine. 49%. Claire and Nathan held the rest jointly. Nathan called it an elegant family arrangement. Maggie would have called it what it was. Me betting on my daughter. I rebuilt the carriage house myself. New footings, new joists, insulation, copper lines, a galley kitchen with maple fronts because Claire always liked maple. I fitted the front door with an old brass lock and had the locksmith key it to Maggie's ring. Same key for the main house side door. Same promise. Nobody gets locked out. That was the promise anyway. For the first year after I moved into the carriage house, we almost looked like a family from across the street. Ben toddled through my workshop in hearing protection too big for his head. Claire would bring me coffee in the mornings if she was up before Nathan. On Sundays, I made blueberry pancakes in the main house, while Nathan slept late and then came down looking grateful enough to be mistaken for kind. But little things started changing long before that dinner. Nathan stopped asking me to sit in the front row at Ben's school programs and started saving me a seat off to the side, because the aisle was easier on my knees. I'm 64, not archaeological. He began introducing me to clients as Claire's dad, who helps around the property, like I was a retired groundskeeper who'd wandered into good lighting. The first time he did it, we were standing under paper lanterns in the backyard during one of those charity evenings Claire loved to stage, all twinkle lights and rented glassware, and women whose laughter came out in short polished bursts. I had spent 3 days rebuilding the warped gate because Nathan wanted the garden to read more refined in photos. He put a hand on my shoulder and told a donor, "Walter's a wizard. We keep him busy." Keep him busy. Not he built half of this place. Not he made this home livable. Just useful old Walter. Handy Walter. Background Walter. I let more of that pass than I should have, partly because Ben adored me and partly because grief changes your standards without asking permission. When you lose the person who used to say, "That's not acceptable," you start making private deals with your own dignity. Then came the second thing that didn't add up. A cream envelope on Nathan's desk, half covered by a leather folio. I wasn't snooping. I'd gone into the study to drop off the cordless drill he'd borrowed and forgotten to return. The envelope had a dark green logo in the corner and the words Hawthorne, Residence, and Memory Care. My stomach dipped. Ben's school was called Hawthorne Academy, and for half a second I wondered if it was fundraising junk mail. Then I saw the line underneath. Intake coordination. Nathan stepped into the doorway before I could take another breath. "Need something?" he asked. There are men who raise their voices when they're angry. Nathan never had to. He sharpened the room by lowering his. I held up the drill. "Just bringing this back." His eyes flicked to the envelope and back to me. "Client matter." He didn't even bother to make the explanation convincing. That night I lay awake in the carriage house listening to the baseboard heat tick and cool. Intake coordination. Memory care. For a client, maybe. Except 3 days later my primary doctor's office called to confirm an appointment I hadn't made. I said, "I think you have the wrong patient." The receptionist said, "You're booked for a cognitive evaluation next Thursday at 10:30, Mr. Bell." I sat down on the edge of the bed so fast the mattress squealed. "What cognitive evaluation?" A pause. Keyboard clicking. "I'm sorry. It notes that your family requested it after recent confusion episodes." My family. I canceled the appointment. Then I sat there in the dim yellow light from the bedside lamp Maggie picked out 15 years ago and felt something colder than anger slide into place. Still, I didn't confront anyone, not yet. You need to understand the kind of father I had been to Claire, or nothing that happened next will feel as ugly as it did from inside my skin. When she was 9, she wanted a treehouse. We didn't have money for a treehouse, and the maple in our yard was too young besides. So I built her a reading platform between 2 posts and painted the railing sky blue because she said books should be read up where birds can respect them. When she was 16 and wrecked the Honda pulling out of a parking lot too fast, I worked 2 Saturday jobs to cover the deductible and told her mother not to make shame the lesson because fear had already done the work. When she got into art school in Chicago and the scholarships weren't enough, I took on stair restorations at night and drove a truck that smelled permanently of shellac and rain for 3 years. I did not do those things to buy loyalty. Fathers who keep receipts on love usually lose twice. But I did those things because I believed sacrifice moved forward. You pour yourself into your children so one day they stand a little steadier than you did. What I could not see then was that Nathan had taught Claire a different language for debt. In his world, help turned into leverage the moment it stopped being useful. Gratitude was a performance you gave in public and resented in private. The third thing I noticed was small enough that most people would have missed it. My medication organizer had been moved. I keep blood pressure pills in a cheap plastic weekly case on the kitchen shelf by the sink. Monday through Sunday. White lids? Nothing dramatic. One evening I reached for it and found Thursday open, even though it was Tuesday. I stood there with my hand in the air, trying to remember if I'd taken Wednesdays by accident. Then I saw the case had been turned around backward. The only person who had been in the carriage house that day was Claire. She'd come by with folded laundry and a distracted kiss to my temple and asked, too casually, if I still had those dizzy spells sometimes. I had one dizzy spell in January after standing up too fast in the workshop. Why? I asked. No reason, she said. Nathan just worries. Nathan did not worry. Nathan prepared. That should have been enough for me to make noise. Instead, I made the same mistake decent men make when someone cruel wears a neat shirt and uses the word concern. I told myself there had to be an explanation that didn't require my own daughter to be part of something ugly. Then came the dinner. It was a Friday night in May, humid and storm-heavy, the kind of evening when the sky goes the color of bruised steel and the whole yard smells like wet boxwood before a drop has even fallen. Nathan was hosting what he called an intimate donor supper for people connected to a preservation board and a city councilman he wanted to impress. Claire had flowers everywhere. White peonies in squat glass bowls. Candles reflected in the dining room windows. They had rented chairs because our ordinary ones weren't cohesive. I was not invited to the table. That part was made clear in stages, which is how people who think of themselves as civilized prefer to humiliate you. First, Nathan asked if I could help the caterers unload because I knew the back path best. Then Claire said they were tight on seating, but of course I should still be around because Ben wanted me there for the cake. Then, while I was buttoning the good blue shirt Maggie bought me for our 30th anniversary, Claire knocked on the carriage house door and said, "Dad, maybe don't wear the work boots. Nathan's crowd is a little polished." Nathan's crowd. I looked down at the boots I had already shined with saddle soap. When I went over at 6:30 with the lemon chess pie Ben had asked for, the place looked like a magazine spread designed by somebody who'd never had to wash a dish. Music low, candles lit, glasses lined like soldiers. Ben ran to me the moment he saw the pie carrier. "Grandpa, did you bring the real one?" "The real one," I told him. "Extra lemon." He grinned, then glanced over his shoulder the way children do when they've already been taught a room's power structure. "Mom said I have to change before dessert because of the pictures." The pictures. Everything with Nathan came back to pictures, even when there wasn't a camera in sight. I helped Ben fix his collar in the hallway mirror. In the reflection, I caught Nathan speaking to 2 men in sport coats near the study. One of them handed him a folder. Nathan slid it under his arm the moment he saw me looking. That wasn't the part that broke me. It was 10 minutes later after the guests sat down. I had been carrying a plate toward the breakfast room because Claire told me I could eat in there and then join for cake, which already felt like being assigned a less embarrassing corner of my own life. Before I reached the doorway, Nathan stepped in front of me. One hand on the plate. One on my forearm. Firm enough that anyone watching would think he was helping. Hard enough that I felt the pressure in the bone. "Not in there," he said. I thought I'd misheard him. "It's the breakfast room, Nathan." He gave a thin smile. "Exactly." Then he lifted the plate from my hands, set it on the counter with the others meant for service, and leaned just close enough for me to smell his cedar cologne. Staff eats after the guests, Walter, and you're not family anymore. The sounds in that kitchen change shape around me. Ice against glass. A dishwasher humming. Somebody laughing from the dining room with no idea a line had just been crossed that could never be uncrossed. I looked past him. Claire was standing by the island holding a wine bottle she was no longer pouring. She saw my face. She saw his hand still on my arm. And she looked away. That was the true blow. Not Nathan's words, her silence. Ben was on the stairs, frozen. I heard myself say, very evenly, then take my name off everything. Nathan's eyes narrowed just a fraction. He hadn't expected clarity. Men like him mistake patience for fog. Claire hissed, "Dad, not tonight." Not tonight. As if there would be a better evening to be informed, I had been demoted from father to inconvenience. I took my hand back, walked out through the side door, and crossed the wet grass to the carriage house without the pie, without dinner, without once looking over my shoulder. Halfway there I realized I was shaking so hard I had to stop by the hydrangeas and brace a hand against the fence post until my vision steadied. Then my phone rang. Private office number. Downtown Exchange. I almost let it go. I answered because grief teaches you terrible timing, and sometimes the worst calls come from numbers you don't know. A woman's voice came through in a rush, professional, distracted, already halfway into the sentence. Mr. Cole, Hawthorne confirmed the room and Dr. Weiss's office sent the capacity letter draft. If Claire signs the temporary guardianship packet before Monday, the title company said the hold should clear and we can remove Mr. Bell before the property transfer closes. I didn't speak for a second because my body had gone cold in patches. Then I said, "This is Mr. Bell." Silence. Just a little office noise in the background. Printer. Somewhere far off, a phone ringing. The woman inhaled. "I'm sorry, The line went dead. I stood in the dark yard with the phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended, listening to the emptiness like it might explain itself if I gave it enough time. Hawthorne. Capacity letter. Guardianship. Remove Mr. Bell. Property transfer. Every odd thing of the last 2 months snapped together so hard I felt ashamed I had needed the picture spelled out for me. They were not trying to make boundaries. They were trying to get me declared incompetent, move me into memory care against my will, and force control over my share of the house in time to sell it. I went inside, locked the carriage house door, and did something I should have done the first time my key stopped working. I opened the metal cash box under the bed. In it were copies of the deed, the occupancy agreement, the canceled wire receipt from the sale of my shop, every major invoice from the carriage house renovation, and a yellow legal pad where Maggie had once made notes during the purchase. She had circled one sentence from the lawyer's email and underlined it twice. Walter's signature required for any sale or encumbrance affecting his interest. My hands were steady now, too steady. At 7:48 that night, while Nathan was probably toasting preservation and community under my lights in a house I had helped save, I left a voicemail for an elder law attorney named Miriam Solis, whose father I'd once built a walnut bookcase for. At 8:02, I emailed the county recorder's office requesting the latest filings on the property. At 8:11, I sent Claire one sentence. "Did you know?" She didn't answer until after midnight. "Dad, please don't make this uglier. Nathan says this is temporary and just until things stabilize." Temporary. Stabilize. There are words people use when they want to smuggle violence through the front door dressed as management. I didn't reply. The next morning, Nathan knocked on my carriage house door at 9:20 with a box of pastries from the bakery on State Street and the expression men practice before performance reviews. "Can we be adults?" he asked when I let him in. He set the white box on my counter like sugar could soften what he'd said. "No," I told him. "You told me I wasn't family. Adults don't say that to old men whose house shares they're trying to steal." He actually blinked. The word steal offended him more than the act. "This hysterical framing," he said, "is exactly why Claire worries." "She worries," I said, "or you tell her to." His mouth flattened. "Look, your living situation has become complicated. You've had episodes. One dizzy spell. You forget things." I forget where I put my tape measure, Nathan. I don't forget the law. He moved then, not visibly angry, more dangerous than that. He slipped into the voice I'd heard him use on contractors he planned to squeeze. The property is under financial pressure, he said. There are grown-up realities you're not in a position to fully understand. We found an excellent residence. Hawthorne is discreet, comfortable, and close by. You'd have staff. Staff, I repeated, as opposed to burdening Claire. That line landed exactly where he meant it to. My daughter. My fear of costing her. My years of trying never to become one more weight after Maggie died. Then he made his mistake. We're doing what's best, he said, and whether you cooperate or not, the transfer is moving. Transfer. Not maybe, not if. Moving. I looked at the pastry box between us, still tied with red string. You used to ask me how to square a door, I said. Now you talk to me like I'm furniture you're having removed before a showing. He gave a humorless shrug. With respect, Walter, sentiment is not title. I smiled then. My first real smile in 24 hours. No, I said, but title is title. Miriam called me back at 11:13. By 1 o'clock I was in her office above a pharmacy, laying out papers on a conference table while she read with the kind of silence that makes liars nervous. Gray suit, silver hair cut sharp at the jaw. No wasted movement. When I finished, she said, your son-in-law is either bluffing, very sloppy, or criminally confident. Which one should I hope for? The sloppy kind are easiest to stop. The confident kind leave better evidence. She had already pulled preliminary records before I got there. There was no completed sale filed yet, but there was a request for an expedited title review and a draft petition template connected to temporary guardianship and county e-filing that hadn't been submitted. Nathan or his office had prepared the runway. Miriam tapped the table with her pen. We need proof of intent, proof of your competence, and if possible, proof of backdating or coercion. Also, if someone from his office called you by mistake, that may become important. As if she had summoned it, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I put it on speaker. The same woman's voice, quieter now. Careful. Mr. Bell? My name is Elena Ruiz. I'm Nathan Cole's executive assistant. I called you in error last night. Miriam leaned back and folded her arms. Elena continued before I could answer. I shouldn't be making this call. But I don't think what he's doing is right, and I think it's bigger than you know. If you want to hear it, I can meet you on my lunch break. That was the moment I understood two things. First, Nathan had rushed this plan too fast to keep everyone in line. Second, once a polished person's cruelty requires paperwork, somebody in the office usually sees the bones. We met Elena at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse. She couldn't have been more than 30. Dark hair twisted into a low knot, under-eye circles, the posture of somebody who had spent years apologizing for men who signed their names with expensive pens. She didn't sit until she saw Miriam's business card. I'm not here to be dramatic, she said. I just need to tell someone before he uses my login for the rest of it. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were printouts, email chains, draft intake forms, a scanned copy of my signature from an old maintenance reimbursement receipt dropped onto a temporary authorization page. Notes from Nathan to Elena that read, need this to look routine, and use Claire's concern angle, and we only need temporary incapacity until close. My vision narrowed so hard around the edges I had to force myself to keep reading. Then I saw the number that made the whole thing make sense. Nathan wasn't selling the house for some strategic family upgrade. He was under pressure from a private lender connected to his failed investment. He had personally guaranteed a bridge note that was coming due. The property sale would clear the debt and preserve the image he had built around being stable, connected, successful. Without it, his cash position collapsed. There was even a line in one email to a developer. Once father-in-law issue is contained, property clear for transfer. Contained, like mold, like sewage, like me. Elena looked from me to Miriam. There's more. He had Dr. Weiss's office send a capacity template before any evaluation happened. I was told to prepare the Hawthorne intake packet in advance. And Claire? She stopped. Say it, I told her. Elena swallowed. Claire signed one authorization, but I don't think she knew all of it. The emails to her were different. Softer, more like temporary support and protecting Dad from stress. She wasn't copied on the dead emails. He kept those separate. That did not make Claire innocent. But it changed the shape of the wound. She had not helped build the knife. She had handed it over because the person holding it was her husband, and because looking straight at betrayal requires a kind of courage many people only discover after blood. Miriam asked one more question. Why are you doing this? Elena gave a small brittle laugh. Because yesterday he told me if I messed up the timing again, I'd be looking for work in a city that talks. And because I watched him practice a concerned face in the black screen of his monitor before he called Hawthorne. She met my eyes then. And because my father is your age. That should have been the turning point that ended it. It wasn't. Nathan realized by Monday morning that something had slipped. He called twice. Then Claire came instead. She knocked softly, came into the carriage house without waiting, and stood by the table where Miriam and I had spread copies into neat stacks. She looked tired in a way makeup can't fix. Not messy tired, hollow tired. Dad, she said, Nathan says you're talking to lawyers. I am. Her face tightened. You always do this. I stared at her. Do what? Dig in? Make everything a standoff. He's trying to solve a problem. I laughed once, short and ugly. By putting me in memory care so he can sell my share of the house? She flinched. That landed. So she hadn't known that part, not explicitly. He said Hawthorne was an option, she said. Because you've been alone, and after Mom. After your mother, I cut in. I rebuilt a rotting outbuilding by hand so you and your son could have a yard. Don't use grief like an umbrella for his theft. Her eyes filled, but I was too deep in it to soften. He said the debt was temporary, she whispered. He said if the house sold, we could reset and buy somewhere smaller and make sure you were taken care of. Taken care of where? In a facility? Under a guardianship petition he prepared before speaking to me? She looked at the papers on the table, then back at me. You're getting this from strangers. No, I said. I'm getting it from documents. That was when she did the most painful thing she could have done short of siding with him outright. She reached for my hand and said, please just sign whatever lets this calm down. Sign whatever. I pulled my hand back. There are moments when a child you raised becomes a full adult right in front of you, and sometimes it's not beautiful. Sometimes it's devastating, because you realize they are now fully capable of choosing comfort over truth, and no amount of bedtime stories or packed lunches can choose for them anymore. I said very quietly, you are asking me to help the man who called me staff remove me from my own home. She started crying then. Real crying. The kind that comes from a place beneath vanity. For half a second I almost stepped forward and held her, because habit is powerful and fathers are built with dangerous reflexes. But then she said, you don't understand the pressure he's under. And I knew she still didn't see the point. I opened the door for her. I understand exactly who's under pressure, I said. For the first time in this house, it's him. By Tuesday, Nathan had moved from concern to attack. The gate code stopped working for me. Claire texted that everyone needed space. Ben's Wednesday woodworking hour with me was canceled because he had a surprise tutor. I received an email from Nathan's firm requesting all future communication go through counsel because my behavior had become volatile. Volatile. The man who tried to warehouse me like inventory was now preparing the paper trail of a difficult old father-in-law. Miriam was not impressed. She filed an emergency notice asserting my property rights, sent preservation letters to Nathan, his firm, Dr. Weiss, and the title company, and arranged for a licensed geriatric specialist of our choosing to evaluate me Thursday morning. Clear head, no impairment. Blood pressure mildly elevated. Understandable given the circumstances. Then Elena sent one more thing. A voice memo. Nathan had dictated it in his office while she was supposedly transcribing notes. His words came through tinny but unmistakable. I don't need him insane, Elena. I need him impaired on paper long enough to close. After that, Claire can visit him every Sunday and tell herself we did the humane thing. I listened to it twice. The first time as evidence. The second time as a father hearing the exact price a man had put on his daughter's conscience. That's when I made my decision. Miriam had been planning a controlled legal stop at the title company Friday morning. Quiet, efficient. But Nathan had scheduled a Thursday night fundraising reception at the house for his councilman, the developer, 2 preservation board members, and a cluster of donors. Elena told us he planned to use the evening to float the family transition story before the sale. If he could introduce the lie socially first, then legally later, people would accept the paperwork as confirmation instead of fraud. That mattered. Men like Nathan did not just move money. They moved narrative. So I told Miriam, I'm done letting him speak first. Thursday night, a storm finally broke over Hawthorne Lane. Not a movie storm. Not theatrical lightning every 10 seconds. Just steady, hard rain and a warm wind that drove water against the porch screens and made the magnolia leaves shine black under the garden lights. I put on my charcoal suit, the one from Claire's wedding, let out once at the waist and brushed carefully that afternoon, and slipped Maggie's brass key into my pocket. Miriam arrived in a navy trench coat. Elena came separately, pale but steady, with a messenger bag over her shoulder. In that bag were printed emails, the forged draft authorization, and a sworn statement she had signed an hour earlier. Last chance to avoid the dramatic version, Miriam told me in the driveway. Nathan picked the venue, I said. The main house glowed ahead of us. Valet stand at the curb. White tent in the side garden. Music under the rain. Through the windows, I could see people holding stemmed glasses and performing concern for one another in expensive clothes. A young man at the door stepped in front of me. Sir, guest list? Before I answered, Ben saw me through the entry hall and shouted, Grandpa! That saved us the first 30 seconds of theater. He came barreling across the rug in socks, skidding a little, and wrapped himself around my waist. I put a hand on the back of his head and smelled shampoo and rain and the peanut butter cookie he had probably stolen from the dessert tray. Nathan appeared from the dining room almost instantly. He was in a dark suit, tie loosened just enough to signal approachable power. Claire was 2 steps behind him in a green dress Maggie would have loved on anyone else. The room thinned around us without anybody obviously turning to stare. That's how wealthy people watch trouble. Indirectly, but as a group. Nathan, I said. You look busy. His smile arrived right on schedule. Walter, we weren't expecting you. I know. Ben still had a fist in my jacket. Nathan noticed and said too lightly, Buddy, why don't you go find Mrs. Hanley and show her your science medal? No, Ben said. That one syllable changed the air. Nathan crouched just enough to look paternal. Go on. Ben pressed closer to me instead. Children know more than adults give them credit for. He had heard tones, seen doors close, watched schedules change around one person. Claire finally spoke. Dad, maybe this isn't the best time. Funny, I said. Your husband says that whenever I'm about to hear the truth. A couple by the bar went still. The councilman pretended to study a framed watercolor. Nathan straightened. If you're here to create a scene, you should leave. You already created one, I said. I'm just making sure the audience hears the whole script. He took one step closer and lowered his voice. Do not embarrass Claire. I laughed softly. You called her father's staff. His face flickered. Tiny, but enough. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. So she had heard that part. She had heard it and done nothing. Then Nathan did what men like him always do when the room might slip away. He seized the narrative with false concern. Walter's been having a difficult few months, he announced to no one and everyone. We've all been trying to support a transition that protects his health and dignity. There it was. Health, dignity, support. The silk wrapping on a choke chain. I looked past him to the room. Then let's talk about dignity, I said. Miriam stepped forward and handed a sealed packet to the title representative from Brookline Escrow, who I had not noticed until then standing near the study with a wineglass she abruptly lowered. Good. Nathan had invited half his own collapse. This is formal notice, Miriam said clearly, that any transfer or encumbrance involving Mr. Bell's interest is disputed, unsupported by capacity findings, and subject to claims of attempted elder abuse, fraud, and coercive guardianship. The room made a sound people only make when they're trying not to make one. Nathan recovered fast. This is absurd. Claire, please take Ben upstairs. But Claire wasn't moving. She was staring at Miriam, then at me, then at Elena, who had just stepped through the doorway from the rain, water on her coat shoulders, messenger bag in hand. Nathan saw her and went white around the mouth. "Elena," he said, "what are you doing here?" She didn't answer him. She walked to Miriam, took out a folder, and said to the room with remarkable steadiness, "I'm here because Mr. Cole instructed me to prepare memory care intake documents and temporary guardianship drafts before any physician evaluated Mr. Bell. He also instructed me to alter timelines related to a pending property sale." Claire made a sound then. Not a word. More like the air leaving a body after impact. Nathan snapped, "You are violating privilege." Elena met his eyes. "Forgery isn't privilege." That line traveled across the room like a dropped glass. Miriam handed copies to the escrow rep, the developer, and, after the briefest hesitation, Claire. "Please review page 4, she said. Claire's hands were shaking so badly the papers rustled loud as rain. I watched her eyes move. Stop. Move back. Stop again. On page 4 was Nathan's email. Need Claire on the concern side, not the debt side. If Walter resists, we push the impaired living narrative harder. Claire looked up slowly. "Nathan," she said, and I will never forget her voice in that moment. Not because it was loud, because it was stripped bare. "What debt side?" He actually tried to smile at her. "Babe, not like this." Miriam nodded to me. I took out my phone and played the memo. In the sudden hush, Nathan's own voice filled the foyer. "I don't need him insane, Elena. I need him impaired on paper long enough to close. After that, Claire can visit him every Sunday and tell herself we did the humane thing." No one moved. The rain tapped hard against the windows. Somewhere in the tent outside, a server dropped a tray and silverware clattered like little bells. Claire's face changed right there in front of all of us. Shock first, then comprehension, then a kind of nausea. Ben looked up at his mother and said, in the small, clear voice only children have, "Why would Grandpa go away?" Nathan turned toward him. "Buddy?" "Don't," I said. For the first time all night, my voice came out louder than his. "Don't use that voice with him." Nathan's control cracked then. Just a hair, but enough for the whole room to see the machinery under the manners. "This was to save all of us," he said. "You think any of this holds together on nostalgia and pie?" The lender was at my throat. The developer was ready. Walter wouldn't understand the financial realities if I carved them into his workbench. The developer, a broad man with wet umbrella cuffs, stepped back like he'd been handed something contagious. The escrow rep said very crisply, "Brookline will not proceed." One of the preservation board women murmured, "My God." Nathan swung toward Claire. "Say something." She was still looking at the email. "You told me Dad asked about assisted living. I told you what you needed to hear so you'd stop panicking. That did it. Not the fraud. Not the property. That sentence. Because in one ugly little burst, he admitted the whole architecture of his marriage. He didn't partner with her. He managed her." Claire's hand went to her mouth. Then she lowered it and did something I had been waiting years to see. She stopped protecting the wrong person. "You told my father he wasn't family," she said. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Claire, you told me he was confused. You told me Hawthorne was a conversation. You used my concern for him to move him out of his own home." People were openly staring now. No more polite aversion, no more social fog. The councilman had edged toward the door. Elena stood straight as a rail. Miriam looked bored, which on her was terrifying. Nathan tried one last pivot. "Walter has been unstable. Ask anyone. The mood swings, the paranoia." Miriam produced the fresh evaluation and held it up. "Competent as of this morning. Documented." Then she added, Also, we have already filed for injunctive relief and referred evidence to the County Elder Protection Unit. If anyone here has been asked to participate in or conceal a transfer based on false incapacity, I suggest you keep every email. That was the moment the room abandoned him. Not morally, maybe. Some of them were likely just protecting themselves. But justice often arrives wearing practical shoes, and I was beyond needing it to be pure. The developer said, "We're out." The escrow rep gathered her folder. "Brookline will be contacting council." The councilman muttered something about another engagement and vanished into the rain. Nathan looked around like a man watching floorboards disappear under his own weight. Then he did the most revealing thing of the night. He pointed at me. "This is because you couldn't stand not being central," he said. "You loved being the martyr in the guest house." I almost laughed. All evening he had spoken in polished halftones, but when the mask tore, the truth underneath was childish. Not strategic. Not brilliant. Just small. A vain man furious that an older one would not quietly lie down and become administratively convenient. I reached into my pocket and took out Maggie's brass key. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I did stand in the guest house. I rebuilt it. I rewired this kitchen. I paid tax arrears that let you buy the address you use to impress people. I fixed your son's bed when you snapped the rail leaning on it to button your cuff. I put my name on this property because my wife believed family should be protected by something stronger than mood. I held up the key between us. And this key used to fit every lock in this place." Nobody spoke. "Then you changed the lock," I said. "Not because of security, because in your mind, once a person became inconvenient, you thought a new cylinder made them disappear." Nathan took a step toward me. "Give me that." It was such a stupid thing to say that a few people actually inhaled. Ben tightened his arms around my waist. I closed my hand around the key and said, "No." At the front door, there was movement. A deputy in a tan rain jacket had arrived with a folder Miriam had arranged to be available for service if needed. Nathan saw the badge, and for the first time in the entire marriage of his arrogance, he looked genuinely afraid. The deputy asked for him by name. Miriam didn't even smile. That would be the emergency protective order preserving Mr. Bell's occupancy and prohibiting interference pending hearing. Nathan looked at Claire as if she might still rescue him. She stepped backward. Not dramatically. Not with a speech. Just one full step out of his orbit. Sometimes that's all a life changes by at first. The rest of the evening dissolved quickly after that. Donors left wet footprints in the foyer. Caterers avoided eye contact and began clearing untouched plates. Elena gave her statement to the deputy and then to an investigator the next morning. Nathan was asked by his own managing partner not to come into the office until the firm reviewed what had happened. Claire took Ben upstairs, came back down in flat shoes with mascara streaked under both eyes, and told Nathan he would not be sleeping there. He laughed at her then, actually laughed. "Where exactly do you think I'm supposed to go?" And Claire, finally sounding like Maggie's daughter, said, "I don't care." That sentence cost her something to say. I know it did, but truth usually does. I spent that night in the carriage house with every light on. Not because I was afraid anymore, because adrenaline has nowhere graceful to go after justice starts moving. I sat at the little kitchen table until 2 in the morning, Maggie's key in front of me, rain easing against the windows, and let the silence settle back into its proper shape. Ben slipped over at dawn in dinosaur pajamas and climbed into the chair across from me. "Are you leaving?" he asked. "No." He looked at the key on the table. "Mom was crying." "I know. Dad lied." I took a breath. Children deserve honesty sized for their hearts, not for adult convenience. "Yes," I said. "He did." Ben nodded like he had already reached that conclusion on his own. Then he asked, "Can we still make the birdhouse this weekend?" My throat closed unexpectedly. "Yeah," I said. "We can still make the birdhouse." What happened next took months, not minutes, because real consequences usually do. Nathan's firm placed him on leave, then cut him loose when the document trail got uglier under review. There were no handcuffs on the lawn, no television vans, no theatrical downfall. Just the slower, truer kind. Bar inquiry. Civil claims. A lender suddenly less patient when the house sale died. Friends who stopped answering. The particular loneliness reserved for people whose charm worked right up until evidence arrived. Claire moved with Ben into a short-term rental for a while, not because I asked her to leave, but because she said she could not breathe in rooms where every wall now seemed to speak. I understood that. The house had become a witness. Our relationship did not repair in one speech. I would distrust any story that claimed otherwise. For a long time, our conversations were careful and tired. She apologized first for knowing too little, then later for knowing enough to ask me to sign anyway. That second apology mattered more. It took her months to get there, because owning cowardice is harder than owning ignorance. I did not make her beg. I also did not rush to soothe her. Love is not the same thing as pretending a wound was small. Eventually, after hearings and negotiations, and the sort of paperwork that turns years of emotion into numbered exhibits, we partitioned the property properly. My share was protected. Damages were paid. The house sold under terms Nathan did not control. I took my portion and bought a modest one-story brick place 15 minutes away, with a deep back lot and a detached workshop that smelled on the first day like dust and possibility. Before I moved in, I did one sentimental thing Maggie would have teased me about. I took the old brass key to a locksmith and had him pin the new front lock to fit it. He held the key up under the lamp and said, "Nice old piece. They don't make them like this anymore." "No," I said, "they don't." Claire comes by now on Sundays with Ben. Not every Sunday at first. Now almost all of them. Sometimes she stands in the workshop doorway and watches me show him how to square cedar boards or sand with the grain. And there is a look on her face I recognize because I once wore it myself when I was younger and had something to rebuild from scratch. Shame, yes, but also hunger. The wish to become better than the worst thing you allowed. That's a long road. She's on it. Nathan, from what I hear, rents a condo 2 towns over and speaks often about misunderstandings. Men like him always do. Their final instinct is never confession. It's editing. But he doesn't get to edit me anymore. The last time Ben slept over, we finished that birdhouse at my new workbench. He painted the roof crooked red stripes and got more on his fingers than the wood. At dusk, we hung it on the maple by the side fence. Then he followed me to the front door carrying a bowl of popcorn too full for his hands. "Can I do the key?" he asked. I handed it to him. He fitted Maggie's old brass key into the new lock and turned it. One clean click, solid, certain. For a second, I could almost hear her in the hallway behind me saying, "See? A home should know who belongs, and this one does."